and welcome to How to Deal When the Shit Gets Real podcast. I'm Marietta.
And I'm Connie, and today we are here with Russell Creed. So, Russell, how do you deal when shit gets real? And really just tell our listeners a little bit about yourself.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me here and introduce me. It's a good question. What do you do when shit gets real? Well, I've been through some things, so hopefully we'll talk about that today. One of the things is that I'm a survivor of primary sclerosing cholangitis. I know that's a mouthful, and I think we're going to talk about that today. I'm also a survivor of having 5 kids, which
God.
is a challenge. And multiple other things. So a little bit about me. I'm a father of 5 kids. I'm a trained actuary. Probably haven't heard of that before. Not too many people actuaries out there. I'm also a men's coach. So one of the things that I do that I've learned through my journey of the challenge of primary sclerosing cholangitis, I learned to really look at myself and what I really wanted out of life, and ask some hard questions. And then I've turned around and I help other men that are in a similar position that are just kind of wondering who they are and what they want to be, even though they're already grown up. And I coach men in finding their purpose and creating a powerful mindset.
Like that. Do you coach only men? Do you focus just on men?
I am focused on men.
I like it.
I understand the man's experience.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Easy to
preach what you know.
Easy to relate.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So as we were talking about in the before we started recording this, we obviously had Desiree on here before who had PSC as well. But if you wouldn't mind still reminding our listeners what PSC is and how you manage your symptoms and any sort of complications, anything basically you want to tell us about it.
All right. Well, PSC is a liver disease. And a lot of times when I say it's a liver disease, people start to think that, oh, well, were you doing drugs or involved in all kinds of illicit things or drinking a lot? And that's not the case. It's not a self-created disease, as some of these sometimes can be. What is happening with PSC is that your bile ducts are actually collapsing. So your body is, for some reason, attacking your bile ducts. And the bile ducts look like a river system in your liver. And what they're doing is they're passing the bile from outside the liver into the digestive system where it's needed to break down all your foods. It's a very caustic, corrosive type of substance. And when the river breaks down, or these bile ducts break down, it starts to dam up. So just imagine if a river, the edges of a river came close together, it would create flooding. Right? So it's that sort of scenario. And so the bile backs up into your liver, floods the liver with this corrosive substance, and it starts to destroy the liver. So that's why they call it a liver disease, even though it's the bile ducts that are collapsing. And there are a number of complications that show up, or symptoms that show up, that are very difficult to live with. One of those is itching. Your body starts to itch everywhere. If you've ever had poison ivy, it's that kind of itching. And it's not just on your hands or your arms or wherever you touch the poison ivy. It's really all over your body. I remember days when the itching was so bad inside my ears.
Wow.
It just drive me crazy. I couldn't get to it.
Oh my gosh, that sounds like torture.
It was torture.
How do you deal with that? Is there anything that helped?
Well, there were some things that they tried to help. And so I would come home from work every day. The itchiness in my legs was so intense from just the socks touching my legs all day. I would take my socks off and scratch my legs for like 20 minutes till they were raw.
Oh my God.
So one of the things that I learned, wear ankle socks, not long socks. And that helped. So a very practical one.
That is.
The doctors initially prescribed me a medicine called Urso, which is very much like a bile salt. I think they derive it from bear bile. And it's supposed to help break down some of the bile and make that itching less of a condition. But it also comes with a lot of other side effects. So constipation and bloating and all other things that really didn't work well for me and made me even more uncomfortable.
Yeah, I don't know what's
We-
worse, constipation or itching. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a hard toss up.
Yeah. That's definitely picking between the two evils,
It was. And it
Yikes.
tasted awful. So
Oh, that doesn't help either.
the next thing they put me on, since I wasn't doing well with Urso, was this very, it was an antibiotic, a very powerful antibiotic. And they don't really know why it helped stop the itching. And it had a side effect. Its side effect was liver damage.
Oh
I guess
my
they didn't
gosh.
care, right? The liver's going down anyway, so let's
Let's
give
just
them
help it along.
Yep.
Ridiculous.
It's crazy to me too how many things seem to have an itching as a side effect, because we also had a previous cancer survivor on, and that she said that was one of her main symptoms too, was itching. So it's
Really?
interesting that you have had that same thing as well.
Yeah, it's so pronounced with PSC. The PSC Foundation, who's trying to find a solution to this disease, it's one of the rare diseases, and there isn't a lot of research on it. Their tagline is "We're itching for a cure."
I love it.
I mean, it works.
Yes.
It's a good one.
So this really strong antibiotic sort of worked. It worked okay. But I was a little reluctant because I'm taking this strong antibiotic all the time that you're only supposed to take for like 3 or 5 days before
my
the
God.
damage sets in, and I'm taking it every day. One thing that eventually finally helped was I went to see a chiropractor, and the chiropractor did some adjustments in my back, and she was always adjusting the stuff that connected to my liver, liver nerves or whatever, every time I would come back. And after a while, it seemed to at least alleviate the itching for me. So that worked for me. The last few years before my transplant, I really didn't have a lot of itching, but early on, it was one of the things that really drove me crazy.
Did they ever give you a reason of why you got PCS, or is it just one of those, or excuse me, PSC, or is it just one of those things that it just happens to some people?
Yeah, they didn't have a good answer for why. They don't really know why. They're still, the research is out, and there is no good explanation for why.
Okay, interesting.
One of the other symptoms was fatigue. So if you've ever been in a car where the gas filter is getting really clogged up and your car just doesn't have any power, it doesn't want to move, that's what your body's like. Because the liver is that filter. It's filtering everything out through your body. And when it's all clogged up, you basically have no energy. I was the kind of guy who was always go, 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 go. I was always dragging the family out on weekends, doing stuff, filling my calendar up all the time.
Honestly, you have to. I mean, that's insane. Like, you'd have to because you have 5 kids. You have to have energy. You can't not have energy with 5 kids.
And I was diagnosed with PSC after our 5th, and it was shortly after that. Actually, I thought I was tired all the time because we had a new baby, and I thought I
Reasonable
was
assumption.
Yeah, and I was itchy because it was summer and I was out in the yard doing all this yard work and doing all the things. And people at work would comment that, "Oh, you look so tired. Why are you always looking so tired?" And my answer was, "Well, we just had a kid." But the reality was I was getting 8-10 hours of sleep a night, and my wife was the one doing all the baby rearing work. It wasn't me. I had really no reason to be tired that I could think of, until I found out what was really causing that.
How old were you?
I was 39 when I was diagnosed, which is pretty common. For men, it usually shows up around 40. I don't know why, but that's when it tends to happen. And I remember we spent my son's first birthday in the hospital being fitted out and measured and tested and all kinds of things to be put on the transplant list.
Wow. What a first birthday.
Yeah.
I hope you guys did something fun after.
I don't remember that part, but
It's
hopefully we
okay.
did.
I'm sure. How were you able to balance your life with the 5 kids while dealing with PSC and your very busy event calendar?
Well, a lot of that fell on my wife. She was the support system that carried us through and handling the family and all the events. I started to stop doing a lot of things that I was doing. I used to run a children's ministry. And when I learned about PSC, I stepped back from that and took on a lesser role and eventually stopped. I helped run a Cub Scout pack because I wanted my boys to have that experience as they were growing up. And basically, they were transitioning onto Boy Scouts at the same time, and I stopped my involvement in Scouts. I just couldn't handle it. So my activity level dropped off quite a bit, and my wife picked up the slack and managing the family schedule. Thankfully, the kids were getting a little older. There's about a 5-year gap between our next and our youngest. So they were more self-sufficient, not completely self-sufficient, but more self-sufficient.
Yeah. Which is probably better than having like 5 kids in a row that are all like 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, you know, because that would have been real hectic.
Yes. Our oldest 4 are 2 years apart. So that was hectic enough. We were a family of 4 kids for a long time and doing all the things. And one thing that we quickly made a decision on is that if a kid wants to do an activity, we're all doing it.
Oh, I like that.
So everyone played basketball. Everyone did softball. And so Saturday mornings was, softball morning, or we had the basketball or the Scouts. The girls were in Scouts, the boys were in Scouts. So we did all these things together, and that helped cut down a little bit on the running around and splitting.
That does help. Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah, it makes sense. Everybody everybody has to go, but everybody has to go to the same place.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, the key, I did have to cut that back a lot of what I was doing. And that was difficult for me at first because I was a go kind of person. Eventually, it's a matter of survival. So you're only doing the things that you need to do to make things happen, to keep going. I don't know, have you guys ever heard of the spoon theory?
No.
So spoon theory is this idea that you only have so many spoons in a given day. And every activity you do is handing out a spoon. And so you got limited spoon supply. And with PSC, you don't really know how many spoons you're going to have in a given day. Some days are really, really hard. And some days you're doing all right. So it was really about managing your energy level, managing your commitments, and managing to do the things you had to do. And then when you did have energy, enjoying that and do some extra things.
Yeah, it probably felt awesome when you randomly were like, okay, I've got energy today. Let's do all the things.
Yeah. I do remember like a year before my transplant, the whole family, we took a vacation to the Smoky Mountains. And so it's probably more like 6 months before my transplant, I was hiking up chimney tops in the Smoky Mountains, which is not an easy hike if you've ever done that.
Yeah, no, that's not an easy hike.
Yeah, I had done that hike maybe 16 years earlier as well, when my first was only about 1 year old, and I carried him to the top on my back. When I did it this time, I wasn't about to carry anyone else.
Yeah. So what happened for you to end up getting the transplant? Like, tell us everything that it expired, not expired.
Led
tell
up
us
to
everything.
it.
Yes. Oh my gosh, I can't talk today. It's fine, guys.
So there's a system that they use to determine who's eligible for transplant. So when you go in and you're getting graded and added to the transplant list, one of the things they're looking at is what's called a MELD score, MELD. And if I recall, it stands for Measure of End Liver Disease. So it's a number, and it's based on your blood work. And it looks at a few things. It looks at your liver function, it looks at your kidney function, and there were like 3 or 4 metrics in this blood measurement that created this score. And based on your region, the person and your blood type, the person who has the highest MELD score in your region is the next one up for transplant. Emergencies aside, so sometimes there's an emergency situation which comes in and trumps everything, but that's how they manage it. And so in my area, in the St. Louis area, the typical transplant occurred between 22 to 25 on your MELD score. And so for a long time, I hung out around 15. Probably for 4 or 5 years, I was in the 15 to 18 range. And the normal person's MELD score is probably about 1. So that gives you a frame of reference.
Okay.
I was in a situation where I quickly deteriorated. So it was October. Well, we're almost on my 7th year anniversary now that we're talking about it. It was in October when I had some issues, and I went into the ER to have things checked out. And I think they ran some tests that they maybe shouldn't have, or gave me some dye, and that really taxed my liver. And so I started it started to really deteriorate rapidly. And so my MELD score started jumping. And I ended up in a place where I went on disability because I couldn't even get out of bed anymore. I was so tired. Walking from my bed to the couch was about all the energy I had in a given day. And then walking back from my couch to the bed. So it's about all I would do and all I could do. I was getting my blood drawn daily at that point because they check the measurement and it can change rapidly. I went in to get my blood drawn on a Friday, and I had a person who was watching me on a daily basis, who was my advocate within the transplant system. And they were looking over my numbers, and the doctor, she told me this later, the doctor said, well, we'll just check in on him again on Monday. And she fought for me. She said, I don't think he's going to make it. He needs to be in the hospital now. So they sent me in, and there wasn't a liver for me at the time, but they had me there trying to keep me alive, hoping a liver would come in. And she was right. I probably wouldn't have made it over the weekend. My kidneys were failing. My liver was in failure. And the doctors would come and check me out. And every day the kidney doctors would say, well, I think we're going to have to put you on dialysis today, but we're going to give you one more day. And the thing is, if they put you on dialysis, it kind of is like a setback. You're not like, can't be the next person in line. So it's not, it's another one of those catch-22s, right? That
okay.
They have to do some other things. So every day you come in, well, I think today's the day, but we'll give you one more day. Final day when he came in to say, all right, this is it. We can't wait any longer. I was able to tell him, well, the surgeon had come just an hour earlier to say, we found a liver for you. And so we're going with that route. We're going to have a liver transplant. So I was in the hospital for 3 or 4 days under monitor, waiting for a liver to come in. Thankfully, I was one of those that was given that second chance. The surgery went really well. And surprisingly, it lasted only about 6 hours. They said it should be about 8. So I went through the surgery exceptionally well. And the next day I was up and walking around.
Wow.
And
I would have expected that.
No. And I was doing fantastic. My color was starting to come back. Another thing that when your liver is in bad shape, you start to get this jaundice, so you're this bright yellow. I was more yellow than your shirt, Connie.
Oh my gosh, yeah. I remember my mother-in-law came home for Thanksgiving. I ended up having to put together her whole Thanksgiving because she was basically the color of my shirt.
Yeah.
But she was allowed to go home. They fixed the problem. But
I started growing a beard to hide as much of the yellow as I could. This was one of my wife's birthday presents. We were going to visit her family for her birthday, and I was riding in the back of the van because I was just so tired. And she was celebrating with her family, and I knew something wasn't right. I knew something was wrong, and I had to go tell her that. And we ended up going to the emergency room, and I was ashen gray. I wasn't yellow at the time. I was ashen gray. I was barely able to walk into the emergency room, and it turns out that I was bleeding out internally.
Oh my gosh.
One of the other complications with PSC is that the veins in your throat kind of bulge. The back pressure from the liver not being able to push the blood through creates back pressure in the veins, and in your throat, they aren't surrounded by meat, by muscle. So they tend to bulge and burst. And that had happened. And so I was bleeding out inside and had no idea. So
that's crazy.
Wow, that is.
Yeah. So they had to go in and clean up my throat, they do what's called banding. So they put these rubber bands over the bulges so that it squeezes them and the body heals over it. And so I was in the hospital for a week, and that was my wife's birthday present. Now,
Oh,
that was
no.
the greatest present for her, right? So
Happy birthday.
She got to spend an extra week with her family. That's what it really was.
Oh, well, I mean, the positive side, right?
Yeah. So after that, every 6 months, I had to be checked. My throat was, they would go down in my throat to check to see if there was any more bulges and deal with that. And every 6 months, you had to get in a CAT or a MRI tube to check for cancer, which is also a strong possibility with that disease, is that you can get choline, or can't remember what it was called, but it's cancer of the liver, right? So they were checking for that.
Was this before or after the transplant?
This was before. So
that was before.
every 6 months before I was having this.
Because you have the PSC in your past, does that, like in your health history past, does that also make like your future more likely for cancer?
So that's an interesting question. I don't think it makes it more likely for liver cancer. Mm-hmm. However, it does make it more likely for skin cancer.
Interesting.
Oh, why? Apparently there's something in the anti-rejection meds that we take that increases our risk of skin cancer by like 500%.
Good grief.
Yeah, I usually wear long sleeves and long
lots of sunscreen.
and sunscreen or big hats. I've already had one instance where I had a little bit of a thing on my forehead that they had to clean up.
Was a living donor ever suggested, or they just waited for you to go into failure and just...
I did have that discussion with my doctor about a living donor, and it's not something that they prefer to do. They say actually there's better results with a deceased donor, and you're not putting a second person at risk. And honestly, I wasn't willing to do that. I wasn't willing to allow someone else to put themselves at risk to save me.
Makes sense.
The good thing is with liver transplants, you don't need a whole liver to have the transplant. So when you are receiving a transplant from a cadaver or a deceased person, that deceased person can support a lot of people, and the liver can be split into two. And usually one goes to the bigger lobe goes to the adult, and the smaller lobe goes to a child.
Oh,
because it regenerates, right?
Yeah, it regenerates.
Yeah,
so.
That's nice.
It's all so interesting.
Yeah.
So you started to kind of talk about your recovery. So what was, you
Yes.
said the surgery went well. So what was the rest of the recovery like?
So the surgery went really well, and I was doing great for about a week. Everything was going just according to plan. I was up, I was walking around, I was getting my strength back, all my numbers were coming back in line. They were still watching a few things, and I had all these activities that I had to reach, these hallmarks that I had to reach. And it was I remember it was a Sunday afternoon, and the resident had come in to take out the final bit of apparatuses that they had on my body to catch all the drainage and all those sort of things and sew me up. And they were waiting for me to have a bowel movement. I finally had it. And when he saw what it was, he recognized the fact that it was filled with blood.
Uh-oh.
It wasn't normal. And so they immediately rushed me back to start into the ICU to find out what was going on. It wasn't visible, couldn't see it, so they knew it was internal. And I remember they were in such a hurry to do something about it. They started shoving things in me before I even was under anesthesia or
Oh my gosh.
signed papers, because they needed me to sign papers. So they were putting stuff in my nose. If you've ever had something shoved way deep in your nose, it's not pleasant.
Oh my
You don't ever want
gosh.
that.
No, thank you.
Yeah, started stuffing, they were in action. And apparently it was such a dire situation. I was bleeding out faster than they can put blood back into me.
Oh my
wow.
gosh.
They had a train of blood running through the hospital as fast as they could to get it back and pump it into my body. And they didn't know where it was. They even let my wife stay in the ICU during that time. I believe it was because they weren't sure I was going to make it.
Yeah.
But they wanted her there to help keep me calm or encourage me and so forth. So thankfully, they had to debate whether or not they were going to cut me open again and go in and find what was going on, or if they could do it laparoscopically. So go in through instrumentation. And thankfully, the expert who could do that was on site.
Well, there you go.
That's good
Yeah.
luck.
Yes, it was a Sunday afternoon, evening. How often are the experts at the hospital on a weekend? Not often. So I was rather fortunate that he was there and was able to go in and find and fix the tear. And so what had happened is when they sew you back up, they have to rearrange things a little bit. And so they put your intestines back in a different place. And my tissues were so weak from the atrophy of the 6 years of just deterioration of my body that some of it was very, very weak, some of that tissue, and it tore apart. And so he had to sew it back up inside me.
Wow.
And I was supposed to go home the next day.
Oh my gosh.
Oh man.
Thankfully, it all happened there.
Yeah, really.
And it was so severe. They put me in a coma. I was in a medically induced coma for a couple of days. And when I woke up, I had basically 60 pounds of fluid on me that wasn't there before.
Oh man.
So imagine someone whose muscles have been in atrophy for 6 years and losing your strength and becoming weaker and weaker. Suddenly you get thrown a 60-pound water vest on you.
Oh my gosh.
I looked like the Michelin Man. All those rolls.
Oh my gosh, that's insane.
And I was immobile. I could not lift my own body.
Wow.
So that was a difficult time. My feet were so swollen that they were, remember Fred Flintstone?
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah.
They were probably twice as thick as Fred Flintstone's feet. I could not get anything on my feet.
Oh my
Finding
gosh.
shoes, finding socks, slippers was
Impossible.
Yeah. And my skin was stretched so much that it was actually leaking fluid through the skin.
Oh
What?
my gosh.
Wow. How do they
would,
fix this?
Ooze. It takes time. It takes rebalancing the chemistry in the body.
Wow.
And they have some other techniques. So they gave me Lasix, which was a drug to help shed it. They also used some banding. So they'd wrap your body in certain areas to kind of force the water to go to other areas. Water follows gravity. So everything was like from here, from my chest down was where the swelling was going. So I kind of I said the Michelin Man, but have you ever seen an orangutan where they're like
yeah.
super skinny up top and then it's just this big blob below?
Yeah.
That was me. That's what I look like.
Wow.
Oh my gosh. Talk about a
Yeah.
recovery.
A human orangutan. That
When
is
you hear something gross,
well,
Oh,
not
gosh.
really, but yes.
so here's another thing. So because I stretched so much, I had a beautiful scar for about 1 week. But because my skin stretched so much, it pulled the stitching and everything, and my scar tissue is now really thick. But the thing that was really gross, and I loved grossing my kids out with this,
Oh,
is that
lovely.
those made little pin cushions, and so in my skin, and water likes to find the easiest path to flow. So the water would come out through the fluid would come out through those stitch places.
Oh my
And
gosh.
if I squeezed my belly, it would make a
God.
fountain.
Oh my goodness.
God. This honestly sounds like a horror movie. Like that should have been like a Halloween costume or something. It sounds terrifying. It also sounds like exactly what my dad would do.
Yeah.
He'd be like, want to see something gross? How can I scare my daughter?
Yeah, that was me.
It's funny now. It's not really funny during when it's actually
Well, I was
happening,
laughing
right?
at it. It was my way of coping, right? I had to find
Oh,
some
yeah.
humor in something.
That's true. So how did you get from there to getting into karate? Because that's quite a journey.
It is, and actually, the reason I got into karate was really threefold. One was my son had gotten into it before my transplant. So we were at dinner one time, and we walked past the dojo. That's where they practice karate, and he was into Power Rangers and all those things on TV. He's like, "Oh, I want to do karate." And when I was a kid, I did karate. So I actually had a black belt in Goju-Ryu karate from when I was a teenager. I went to Japan for a year and studied karate there, along with
That's
other
awesome.
things. So it's part of my upbringing. And if my son wanted to do it, I was all for it. So he joined before my transplant, and he was about a year into it afterwards. And so I thought it would be a good idea to join him and do that with my son, who really never had an opportunity to do things with dad because he was always sick his entire life.
Yeah.
Oh, that's sad.
Yeah.
But
He would hear
The
stories of
karate
his
got
other brothers and sisters and all the things we would do. And, he didn't have that opportunity. So this was my opportunity to join with him. And it became a way for me to help build back my strength and to facilitate the healing of my body.
Was karate really like the only thing you did to help facilitate the healing, or was it on top of like regimens and whatnot that doctors prescribed?
Yeah, it was on top of that. So there was a lot that the doctors prescribed from a medication perspective early on. I was on a cocktail of medications for about a year to prevent rejection and to help with the healing. And regular exercise, they recommend regular exercise as well.
Yeah.
And so this was a form of that for me, and one that I
That's
really enjoy. And for me, karate is more than just a physical component. There's a spiritual and mental aspect to it as well.
Did you end up, because I don't know why, like the healing made me think of, did you have to go to like PT or occupational therapy after you got done with the transplant?
I did. I had both occupational therapy and physical therapy. A lot of the physical therapy happened in the hospital.
Mhm.
originally, but yeah, when I was home, they had me working both of the occupational therapists and physical therapists would come to my house to help with that. So early on, that was my form of training. You know, they had to help me get in and out of bed once I could finally move, how to take a shower again, how to do all the basic things. And
How to
then,
be a
yes,
human. My brother's
be a
going
human.
through all that right now.
Yes. So that was both that. And then when I was able, and I really wasn't very able, but when I was able, I started going to the dojo to do karate. And I remember when I first started, I couldn't balance at all, again, on one leg, which when you're doing kicks, that's kind of important.
Yep.
I couldn't do
Only a little.
I couldn't do a sit up, and part of that was because of when they do the surgery, they cut all the way across your abdomen.
Wow.
Open you completely up.
That is a big cut.
Yeah, my cut goes from side to side through the middle and then up to the middle of the chest.
Wow.
Just right under the chest, right under the chest bone. Looks like
I
a
wouldn't think-
Mercedes symbol.
I wouldn't have thought it would have been that big. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, I know.
They fillet you like a fish.
Good
Yeah, they did.
grief. Gordon Ramsay style over there, I guess.
Yeah.
You are filet-o fish.
Yeah.
So did all of this inspire you to become the men's mindset project coach that you started doing?
It was the start of the journey. I'll put it that way. Because
Okay.
what really happened is that afterwards, after my transplant, I went through a very dark time. I was struggling with a lot of things. And as I look back now, some of it has to do with just survivorship and the trauma that survivors go through. But I was struggling with my place in the world, going back to doing the same things that I wasn't exactly always happy with. Like I did a lot of things because I felt like I had to do them, not because I wanted to do them. I was taking care of a family, and so I needed to do these things to go to work and do the job I was doing and give up all the things that I enjoyed doing to support my family. That was the mindset I was in. And it led me down a dark path where I actually hated life. Even though I had just been given this great gift to live again, I was ungrateful and I hated being alive. And I thought actually that at some point that maybe I died and had gone to hell, whatever that proverbial hell is, because life was so horrible for me for a while. And I know now that was my own creation. I created that for myself, but I was so embroiled in it at the time that I couldn't see my way out. And in fact, there was a time when I almost ended my life.
Oh my gosh.
Afterwards, I was in that dark of a place.
Yeah.
And so it was my journey from that place of darkness to a place of light again, where I'm super excited about life. I'm grateful for life. I enjoy all the gifts that are given to me. And that didn't happen overnight. That happened with the help of others, with the coach, with some other mentors and supporters. The karate dojo was a big part of that because it's about mental and spiritual training as well. And so it was a culmination of those things that brought me to where I am today. And that's really what inspired me to step back and reach back to others, hopefully to get to them before they go through such a trauma that I went through.
Yeah,
Right?
absolutely.
Because I was basically, going through the motions beforehand. And part of that was because I was in the survival mode, right? I just have to get through the day, every day, keep putting one foot in front of the other. And when you're so exhausted and so tired and can barely think, you just are going through the motions. So I've been there in the extreme, and I know others are there, maybe not in the same extreme, but still just going through the motions of life, not really living to their best, living who they really are. They buried that down, and so that's who I want to help. to get connected to who they are, to their purpose, and be excited about life.
So when did you start the coaching?
Yeah, I started that about a year ago,
All right.
last summer when we were all in quarantine.
Yep.
I went through some mindset training. So the same coach that helped me out of the place I was in, I got trained under them and their methodologies and started coaching men last year.
That's awesome. I feel like a lot of that type, not just like the coaching, but in general, people have expanded their idea of what they want from life because of COVID and being quarantined. Like I know a lot of people who started Etsy shops and all that, like entrepreneurial stuff.
Right.
So good for you.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's awesome. And then you're also going to have a book coming out, if I'm correct.
Yes, I'm super excited. I'm part of a book. It's called The Great Conquest. It's part of the Becoming the Big Me. And you can actually get on the wait list for that book by going to thegreatconquest.com. It is coming out in just a couple of weeks. And my story in more detail, like what we've talked about today, is one of the chapters in the book. So it's a book filled with inspiring stories of those that have overcome. It talks about their great conquest and what they've done with that.
Sounds like a great book and a very inspirational book.
Yeah, I think it would be great.
So did you write your own chapter or did you talk with the author and then the author wrote it?
Yeah, we went through a work together. So I shared my story and the author helped
write it down together. Okay. So it was really collaborative. That's cool.
Collaborative effort. Yes.
Awesome.
Yeah. So I'm excited about that.
So what is some advice you'd give our listeners?
So the thing that I would advise is that let people know that they are more powerful than they think they are. Even in those darkest moments, you can make it. And we forget that a lot of times when we're stuck in that moment and everything feels so hard, feels so overwhelming, and we get this myopic view of life. And we forget how powerful we are, that we are indeed unconquerable. I would encourage you that if you look back on your life, every challenge that's come to you so far in life, you've found a way to get over it and to get through it, right? That's because you are unconquerable. You are a survivor. And so that's what I would hope people to take away is to recognize that they are. And in those dark moments, have faith. Have faith that it will all work out. And you can look back at your life, and so far it has.
It's a good reminder, and I think we all need it.
So, what is your biggest guilty pleasure in life? Like food or TV, whatever you want.
So, I am one of those kids that grew up in the 80s and was into comics. Big time into comics. I had my collection of comics. And so I am reveling these days from all the superhero movies and shows that are out. And I can't get enough of them. So that's what I do is in my free time, my son and I, we watch superhero shows. And we just finished the complete 7 seasons of Flash.
Nice.
And I'm not sure what's next on our list, but that's
I've heard the Loki series. I think that's what it is. Loki. And Disney Plus, I've heard is really good. I haven't watched it. Okay, before you watch it, so that I don't even know why I said it.
My husband would absolutely agree with all that. He loves he's been loving all the Marvel and everything. I remember when we were in the movie theater and Captain America wielded Mjolnir for the first time. He I thought he was going to jump up and down out of his seat.
I have been to the theater twice in the last year, and both of them were for superhero movies.
There you go.
My husband has convinced himself that he doesn't like superhero movies because of how many there are out there. And I said, "Hun, when we first got together, that's like all we watched." I'm like, just so you know, you're lying to yourself.
Yeah. And I get it, because when we were kids and we would admit that we were superhero fans, we were laughed at, right? Reading comics. So I think at least if some of us carry that forward, into our older age.
Well, he tries to tell me now, like, no. I always loved DC comics. It's the Marvel comics. I'm like,
Oh,
sure.
well, we would
And
be on opposite sides. We'd have
and I'm
fists
like,
going because
I
I
don't-
like Marvel. I'm a Marvel guy.
Well, and I think it's all BS because I've watched all of the Marvel and all of the DC with him. So I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, bud. I guess you just have limited memory on comics, and that's fine.
And I want to be clear, Flash, I recognize as DC. I know it's DC. My son had to talk me a lot
Into
into
watching it. Nice.
watching it with him.
Well, Russell, is there any one last thing that you want to leave with our listeners before we close out?
My advice is recognize that you're unconquerable. Be unconquerable and go out and live that way. So you can find me in multiple places. I have this book coming out at thegreatconquest.com. I have a website for my coaching called the invictuslife.com. And I'm available on the social medias at my name, Russell Creed.
And we will link all of those things in our show notes so everybody will have easy access to them.
Awesome.
That's awesome. So thank you for coming on our show. And this is How to Deal When Shit Gets Real. There are new episodes every Friday. And everyone, don't forget to rate and review us and obviously listen, of course. And we'll see you next Friday.